we're in the hangar today, and we're going to take the long Easy up for a flight. The purpose of the flight is just to go verify the avionic package that I've installed, make sure everything works, and I'll be shooting probably an RNAV LPV approach to runway 5, which is a GPS approach with vertical guidance, and then come back around and go do an ILS to runway 5 as well. I've had a little bit of issues with the ILS localizer course. It seems to jump around a little bit, and the autopilot tends to follow that. That's not the autopilot's fault, obviously. The signal is a little unstable. But let me take you around, show you the cockpit real quick, and then we'll pick it up once we're airborne. Right? Hopefully everything goes all right. I'm still learning how to use this avionics package, and I have to say it's not the most well documented, but I think I got it just about figured out, so hopefully everything goes well. So let me come and get you. We're going to take a look at the cockpit real quick. All right, pardon the shaking. I've detached the camera, and we are walking toward the cockpit right now. You see, I've been working on the avionics for quite a few months. I got stuff everywhere. And this is what we have. The GNS 480 on the left. This is the main radio. And the EFIS, there are two GRT Mini. The top one is PFD, the bottom is the MFD. So we can get you a little bit closer without a glare perhaps. That might be a little bit difficult. Obviously you can have different maps on this Mini, but you know, for flying IFR I prefer it with the HSI. I got my iPhone here on this side. I use that with ForeFlight and I use it, you know, as a movie map as well. And let's see, show you the back here. There's nobody sitting in the back today, so I have the back cockpit secured. Alright, so without further delay, let's go for a little flight. Okay, mixture full rich. Adding full power for takeoff. Airspeed is alive. Rotation. And positive rate gear up. Gear off. And since we have it, we're going to use the heading bug as a reference for a crosswind lag. And normally I would have turned the fuel pump off, but I just forgot, and so I have it on for half of the flight pretty much. And we're gonna keep climbing above the traffic pattern altitude all the way to our selected altitude of 2,500 feet. And now that we're about 500 feet above the traffic pattern altitude, we're going to start turning more to the southwest to pick up our approach. And just in case you can't read it, the message that just popped out says selected altitude approaching.
So now let's tell the GNS we're ready to go direct to drone, which is our initial approach fix for the LPV runway 5. As you can see, it's pretty simple. Okay, so I'm going to turn on the autopilot, the roll autopilot, and use a shortcut nav-al to follow the course to drone. But as you can see, it just reversed back to heading hold, and I didn't quite notice that. Not really sure why it did that, and spent the next couple of minutes trying to figure out why the airplane is not going where I think it's supposed to be going. It's only my third flight behind this IFR panel, and I'm still trying to figure out how to set up the approaches. So I kind of put together a little cheat sheet that you can see right there, and I'm trying to follow it now to make sure I don't stray too far and start getting myself all turned around trying to do one of these approaches. So I'm going to try to set it up so I can go direct to Naldi, which is the final approach fix, and probably set up a hold after that too. But before I do that, I'm going to start turning the heading to make it go more to the south. Realize that it's on heading hold and the autopilot is not following my heading commands. Here, start turning the heading selector off, but only to find out that when I get back to it, it's back on heading mode. Now look at the bottom screen. You'll see the heading just turned green. So the bottom screen is actually following the heading right now, even though the flight, the checker box up there still says heading hold. And you can see that the airplane is actually following the command from the bottom screen. We have it selected on autopilot 2, which is the bottom after all. And it's turning on a heading mode, even though the top still says heading hold, which is really confusing to me at this point. So I'm starting to turn to the south and on a heading mode, while the top screen says heading hold. Now I'm sure you missed it. I just gave it a direct command to go to Naldi, and so now I'm going to select GNav. And there you go, it's on GNav and we're going direct to Naldi at last. So meanwhile in the top screen you can see Lake Drummond going by. We're flying over Lake Drummond about 2,500 feet. Okay, so now we're on our way to Naldi, and you know, obviously we can intersect the approach right there. So I figure set up a holding pattern over Naldi with a 048 inbound and right turns, and then we can, after we enter the holding pattern, we can knock it off and transition to the approach. And at this point, we're going to slow it down to about 90 knots since we're in a holding pattern. It's 1 minute long, doesn't matter how fast you go. This way we save some fuel and we'll be set up for the final phase of the approach. I will be also at 90 knots. Now, what makes this flight a little bit tough is because I don't have a vertical autopilot yet installed. The servo is not installed. And so I have to hand fly altitudes and also look out for traffic, which I have been doing this whole flight. And partially that's the reason why I chose 2,500 feet, because most of the guys out here fly at 2,000 or 3,000 feet. However, the approach starts at 2,000 feet, so once we turn back inbound, I'm going to have to remember to go down to 2,000 feet to be on the proper altitude to intersect the vertical profile of the approach. What is amazing to me is that I've been staring at the fuel pump light for the past, I don't know, 20 minutes, and still I'm so task saturated between flying, programming, looking outside, making radio calls, and so on and so forth, that I never actually saw the light being on. That's how task saturated you can become in this kind of situations. Not that the fuel pump being on is any big deal, but you know, you get my point. Here I'm setting up the heading bug to the inbound course of 048. At just about the same time, the autopilot starting to turn to the right to rejoin the final course. Of course, we haven't set up the approach as far as telling to shoot the LPV approach, which we're going to do right now. But first we're going to have to unsuspend the GPS, otherwise we're going to remain in this holding until we run out of gas. So let's take the cheat sheet and look what we're supposed to do. Right there, did you catch that? I'm trying to unsuspend it, but I'm actually pressing the function key. That is located right below the suspend light. The suspend button is actually further to the left. A little bit of a bad design, but I'll find that in just a minute here and unsuspend it again. Okay, step one is to arm the synthetic approach that gives me the radar altimeter-like feature and the highway in the sky presentation. Now we're going to arm the GPS V when we're clear for the join the course. And I don't know if you caught it, but in the checkerboard up to the top left corner, the GPS 1 in the green box became LPV 1 green with a synthetic approach on standing by in the black. You can catch this during the flight, but if you see the top right checkerboard, it says LPV 1 in the black box. So that means that the vertical profile of the approach is armed to join the glide slope. So I'm not sure that pressing VNAV again now is going to make much of a difference. Probably something when I need to check it out with GRT engineers.
You should be right. You should be done. LPV capture.
See, as you can see, we're back in altitude hold with the LPV1 vertical profile armed on the top right side of the screen. Now I remember that I gotta go down to 2,000 feet, so we're gonna select the 2,000 feet target altitude and descend in vertical speed 500 feet a minute.
Let's see what happened here.
In this plane, when I pull the power back to idle, if the landing gear is not down, I get a loud beep, as you can tell. It's a feature designed to prevent you from landing with the gear up, but it's a bit of an annoyance sometimes. Look at the bottom screen now. There you go. See the green horizontal bar? As soon as we pass nullity, we get the horizontal bar, which is the representation of the virtual glide path that takes us all the way to the runway on the GPS LPV approach. every time I touch the power. Yeah, it's kind of hard to slowing down with this airplane without making a lot of noise. Anyway, now what we're waiting for is for the green bar, the horizontal green bar, to start coming down. That represents the center of the glide path. We're below our glide path, holding 2,000 feet, going toward the glide path, and as soon as we intersect it, which means that the green bar gets into the middle where all those little dots are, that means that we are on glide and on course, and we can start reducing the power and start descending for the runway. That happens and we capture the glide slope. The LPV1 that you see on the top right of the screen in black is going to jump over to the fence where it says altitude hold, and I think it's going to become green, and that's going to be our indication that the glide slope is captured. And if we had an autopilot, a vertical autopilot, it will start flying down the glide slope. In this case, I'm going to have to nose it over and pull the power and do it manually. Alright, let's speed this up a little bit. Meanwhile, you can notice the horizontal green bar is starting to descend. That means we're getting closer and closer to the glide path. Now you can see the vertical autopilot just captured the LPV1 and they moved over to the right in green. I thought it would have done it a little bit later, but apparently it's got enough, signal to capture the vertical guidance. So theoretically, if I had an autopilot on the vertical side, it would be all automatic. Now I'm just waiting for the green line to get into the middle, and then we're going to start down. Meanwhile, we have checked the fuel pump is on. We put the gear down. We checked the fuel tank is a tank that has enough gas, and that's a typical GUMS check. I'll hold the speed brakes, or should I call it landing brake, up until I'm ready to land. In this case, since I know I will go and miss approach, I won't even bother putting it down. Now, if you look at the indication on the altimeter, the tape on the vertical tape on the right, you see that the altitude is starting to go down, which means I nosed over and I'm decreasing the altitude. The whole goal of this exercise, in case you've never done one of these before, is to maintain the two green arrows centered on the bottom screen, which means that you are on course and on glide, and it pretty much will drive you all the way to the touchdown zone on the runway. Talking about that, the number in green that you see on the top screen, right in the middle, it's a computer-generated distance from the airfield elevation to the altitude that is displaying on the right side. So it's not really a radar altimeter per se, it just kind of gives you an indication of your altitude off the ground. Now, the minimum altitude that we can descend on to with this approach, an LPV approach, is the decision altitude of 218 feet mean sea level. So that would be indicated on the vertical tape, 218 feet. And since the field elevation is 18 feet off the ground, when we get 218 feet on the vertical tape, the green number should theoretically say something around 200 feet. And I'm in the habit of setting the misapproach altitude at about 1,000 feet AGL. So now that I just passed 1,000 feet, I'm selecting my misapproach altitude. In this case, we go back for a different approach, so back to 2,500 feet. Now, when we push the misapproach button, that button right in the middle of the top screen there, when we press that button, the autopilot is going to continue following the GPS. So it's going to remain in GPS tracking mode until it gets at some point over the runway, and then it will make a turn to the left to go back to the Nalde intersection. At the same time, it's going to command a climb at 500 feet a minute. Now 500 feet a minute is not a lot, so once I add power to go miss approach, we're probably going to be climbing a lot faster than that. But you know, regardless, that's what we're anticipating is going to happen. Now, I'm used to flying in track mode on the bottom screen and heading mode on the top screen, so I'm sure a lot of people will disagree with that. But one of the good things that is going to come from that is that every approach is always straight up and down on the bottom screen, so you will never have a crab left or right. Every approach is always straight up and down as far as the HSI is concerned, regardless of the crosswind that is present at the time. Now the runway is going to be left or right of you know, of the nose, depending on the crosswind component. But as far as the HSI is, looking at the HSI, that's always straight up. All right, we're just reaching our minimums, so we're going to press the missed approach button. That's going to sequence the autopilot. And at this point, we're going to add power, raise the nose, raise the landing brake if we had it on, and raise the landing gear also. And we're going to continue to follow GPS guidance at this point while we're climbing to 2,500 feet. And you can actually see the runway, the black strip right in the middle of the top screen going by beneath us. Now reaching 500 feet, the autopilot is going to command a left turn back to the Nalde intersection, where normally you will go there and hold and decide what to do next. And we are still on autopilot, of course. And going through 1,000 feet, this time I remember to turn the fuel pump off. So I'd like to point out that on the top right corner of the top screen there's a red block, and that's right where the 2,500 feet I set for the missed approach altitude is. So I'm not quite sure why that is, why the 2,500 feet is not there anymore. But I think it has something to do with selecting a vertical mode for the autopilot to follow, apparently still in the go-round mode. So it will actually not capture that altitude. I'm trying that out, and I will go up to 2,600 feet without the autopilot capturing that altitude until I scroll through the modes, and I'll find out that the altitude autopilot is actually off at this point, and I have to reselect it on auto, as you will see here in just a moment. So as soon as I execute, the 2,500 feet comes back, and we're gonna go back into altitude capture mode. There we go, the altitude just being captured by the autopilot, and so now If I had an actual autopilot and, for the vertical mode, it would be holding 2,500 feet at this point. Okay, so we're on our way back to Naldi. What we're going to do next, we're going to do an ILS approach that starts at Naldi. We're going to select it with the Naldi transition, which should let us do a holding in luau to turn the airplane around. Unfortunately, by the time I get to hit the direct Naldi, I am so close to Naldi that I just overflew Naldi, and the autopilot ends up disconnecting, as you'll see here in a second. But I never really noticed that the autopilot disconnected. I wish there was like some sound or something that it did, but the autopilot just goes, lateral autopilot just goes on standby, and unless you're there looking at it, you will never know it. Obviously, this is my fault because I'm a little too slow with this radio, but you know, it takes a while to get used to it, and that's one of the reasons why we don't start plunging into bad weather with brand new radio, brand new equipment, and you need to take time to learn how to use it. And now if you look at the top left corner of the top screen, you see autopilot just went lateral nav standby. So here, turn the airplane around back to the north to intercept the course. I have flip-flopped the ILS frequency. 111.7 is in the active right now. Press the CDI button on the GNS 480, and now we have wide needles, which means VHF navigation. And so now I'm on the heading to join the final approach course. So now if you look at the top left of the top screen, you'll see that I usually select GNAV because and it'll turn green, GNAV, right then and there, you see it. And I usually use the GNAV because the PFD knows when to change from GNAV to ENAV. As I execute the ILS right there, just turn to ENAV as I executed the ILS capturing command. From this point on, it's basically the same scenario as the previous approach, except the needles are white to indicate that it is a VHF approach, so using the ILS and a glide slope and not a GPS approach. But other than that, it is flown the same identical way. Of course, I still need to get back down to 2,000 feet, so I'm going to select 2,000 feet in my pre-select and use vertical speed 500 feet a minute to start going down.
Meanwhile, gas is still on the right side. undercarriage, mixture, pump, speed brake and standby.
And just like with the LPV approach, glide slope gets captured about half of the way, half deflection up. Alright, so we reached the glide path, and now we're going to start going down. The decision altitude for less approach is 200 feet above the ground, which is still 218 feet for this type of approach. So 218 feet will be on the altimeter tape on the right side of the top screen, and 200 feet approximately will be in the green indication in the middle of the top screen. Now when we go missed approach on this approach, which is VHF, it will not go directly into GPS mode. It will go into a heading all mode and vertical speed about 500 feet a minute. So if you wanted to go back to Naldi for another approach, you'd have to remember to activate the GNAV feature of the autopilot. Now in our situation, we're just going to set 1,000 foot missed approach altitude because we're going to remain in the traffic pattern. We're going to go back crosswind, downwind, and base and final, and then we make it a full stop, and we'll be down for the day. Now, next to the altimeter setting at the bottom right corner of the top screen, you see to the left, you see the wind indication. You can see that we have a good 20 knots crosswind, yet if you look at the bottom screen, the HSI is straight up and down. And then is once again because I'm flying in track mode on the bottom screen. Obviously, when I look outside, I see the runway to the right, of course, because my nose is to the left, of course. But flying in track mode allows you to always have the approach straight up and down. Every single approach you do is always straight up and down. And after a while, you kind of get used to it, and it's a pretty nice feature.
Service approach altitude is going to be 1,000 feet. Feet.
Now you will see here as I'm going around, I'm going to bring up the speed brake or landing brake anyway, even though I didn't use it this time. Now in this case it was not necessary, but it's a good thing to get in the habit of doing all the go-arounds and other procedures always the same way. You know, next time you might have the flaps down and you forgot because it's your third or fourth approach, and it's good to get into a habit to bring them up regardless. It will prevent you from going around with the flaps or spoilers down. Again, in this case, you see the top right corner of the top screen is red, but now I'm selecting a vertical mode, indicated airspeed, so now I get my altitude indication again, and at this point the autopilot will capture, or it should capture, the altitude, at least let me know that I'm approaching my selected altitude. And also I'm turning the heading to a crosswind, and then I'll probably knock the autopilot off here in just a second.
Alright, let's see, gas, still on the right side. Undercarriage, mixture, bomb. Gas, undercarriage, mixture, pumps, mid-brake, steady bomb, great enough. That's it, actually, it's
Now it's going to look like I'm landing in the grass on the screen, but we're actually 1,000 feet down the runway.
Hey guys, well, we're back in the Easy shop. Man, I'm worn out. Yeah, I apologize, that was not some of my best flying, for sure. But again, there's still a lot to be learned. I'm still not sure about a lot of things. Again, the manuals are a little bit lacking as far as details. So a lot of the function, I'm really not sure what they do, and I have to cross-reference with the GRT HXR manual and some things that don't translate exactly. Plus, the GNS 480 is a beast. That radio is incredible, but you know, it takes again, it takes some time to learn that too. So for that purpose, I actually bought, if I can show you, a unit here so that I can put the radio in here and I can be at home practicing, because the only way that these approaches are going to get any better is if I practice a lot. And so obviously before I end up flying IFR with this thing, I want to be confident that I know what I'm doing, and I want to be confident that I'm not going to look as bad as I look today. But hey, I'm sharing it. You know, I make mistakes, and the big thing is not to put yourself in a position where you can get in trouble or can get hurt, and that you can learn from all your mistakes. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm sure you won't agree with everything that happened today, and you know, next time is going to be better, and we're just going to keep improving and continue to make progress. All right, take it easy, and I'll see you next time.